When we think of vast colonial empires, the British Empire is often one that springs to mind, but indeed this empire had a very much equally imperialistic sister, the French Empire. What was the legacy of this empire? Why was it important? What were the cultural characteristics? Was it any good? Was it all just a load of evil? From Africa to Cameroon to French Indochina, this is the French Empire. Right, I'll be taking you on a 10-part series, 10 episodes, right from the downfall of Napoleon all the way up to modern day. So 200 years of history, a lot to cover, a lot to crack through. This is the French Empire, and I hope you enjoy this series. Welcome to episode 2 of the French Empire series. We have now seen Napoleon and the French very much defeated at the Battle of Waterloo, but like I said, down and not out. And there's many places in the world that are small, easily accessible, and a bit of a shippery and naval force can definitely take hold. And one of these is the Caribbean, and actually just next door to France, in some declining Ottoman territory. This is the French Empire, episode 2, Caribbean Conquest, and North African Advances. Let's begin. Sources to the video are linked down in the description. After the disaster of the Napoleonic Wars, it was fair to say the French were, at least politically, were not in the mood to sort of lollop around in Europe again and try and annoy enemies. I mean, why make enemies at this point? Luckily for France, they do have a coastline. Several, in fact. One of them, of course, the Mediterranean coast. And at the just south of that, the sick man of Europe is still very much being sick. The Ottomans are having very much problems with the Regency of Algiers. They simply cannot hold the territory. Luckily, the French seized this opportunity and began naval blockading territory away from the Ottomans. And not only does this benefit their own economy, because then they get more trade, they do start seizing in 1830 the Regency of Algiers. However, we'll come on to Algeria a little bit later on. But it was clear that just a little bit of clever and wittiness, you can quite quickly start colonising more of your neighbours by simply having access to that coastline. Hence why like I said, France is actually such a good coloniser in that respect. However, now we're facing on to the main portion of this video, which is the Caribbean. I mean, just look at this territory here, 1816. It's been a year since it was, but still, look at all that territory the French have the Caribbean. Guadeloupe, Martinique, it's all there and it's all theirs. Since 1674, the French have been in Guadeloupe, and of course, controversially, of course, it was all about the slave trade. And indeed, very much so, the French, throughout the entire history of their slavery in the Caribbean, unfortunately saw 1,100,000 innocent native black Africans and Afro-Caribbeans transported to, in all the same brutal conditions as all the other slaveholding countries, to the Caribbean. And Martinique especially was a very big interest of the French, as luckily for the French, although one of the luckily for the French, when it comes to Martinique, there was a neighbouring colonial power which was in decline and recession, and that was Spain. Now, France dreamed of replicating the wealth of Spain and the system they had, and of course having control of that all-important tropical zone of warm weather. Although I'm not quite sure what the French excuse is. I mean, the British, they had poor weather. No wonder they wanted to be colonising, get some better ones. But anyway, the French wanted more nice territory. And once Spain declined, France seized the opportunity. One of these people, like before our time is looking, but still relevant, but very much, Pierre Blaine. And he was a very big French coloniser in the Caribbean. And he saw vast waves of the Caribbean under French control, particularly the eastern Caribbean, as the aforementioned, such as St. Lucia, Guadeloupe, Martinique, as witnessed on the map. Unfortunately, Pierre Blaine was just like any other brutal coloniser, and he was interested in slavery, deception, and corruption, and treated his conflicts brutally. So much so that there was actually a statue erected to him. However, on the 26th of July 2020, a group of activists and anti-French colonial supporters tore down the statue. Returning back to the timeline, of course, slavery was abolished and the French had jumped on the bandwagon at the end of the 19th century, but this didn't really matter. physically the French Empire was just as strong, although social reforms had also luckily been taken. Many French citizens, indeed white or no matter what race you are, of course agreed that slavery was bad. And this is another part of the French Empire that it has actually now begun to leg a good legacy. They were, like the British, they wanted to end the slavery, they wanted to have progression, not conservatism when it came to Caribbean territories and North African territories. They wanted that to change to these countries like Guadeloupe and Martinique. However, of course, it didn't really matter because effectively the reforms being passed by the rich and wealthy men, as they were very rich off the Caribbean. In fact, the French Empire, as much as 15% of its economy at this point, was just from sugar alone from the Caribbean. So it didn't really matter, they simply had all the money already. It didn't matter to the slaveholders, again similar to many other countries, they had to pay off the slaveholders and then, but like I said, it didn't really matter, they had all the money to begin with. And socially, there was much more immigration to France from the Caribbean. Black people did begin immigrating to France, and France did have to get more culturally diverse, which is what made the French Empire a little bit more sustainable because there was now that interlink. It wasn't just white men, sort of white men going towards the Caribbean from France and going against or attacking black men, or just generally being, unpleasant. There was now that link between all cultures from the Caribbean, North Africa in France, which is what made it more sustainable because there were now also, for example, Afro-Caribbean French soldiers going to Guadeloupe to maintain control of the territory. It was a bit more welcoming, of course, seeing a massive horde of French, ships, sending cannons into your sand fire. So yeah, it was pretty good for the French, and it was clear that the empire was now secure in the Caribbean for many years, decades to come. As for North Africa, things were not so simple, and they could not hold that territory quite easily as in the Caribbean. But we'll get onto that in next time. So conclusion, the French in some ways benefited from the downfall of Napoleon, as they were slightly more left alone, albeit militaristically slightly downgraded. They seized the opportunity and managed to quickly attack, of course, that poor man of Europe and colonise more of North Africa and the region of Algiers. And in the Caribbean, those slaveholders such as Pierre Blaine's work was very much still important. And with the abolishment of slavery by the French, they still managed to maintain control of that Caribbean territory and again power their economy more, do yet more empire building. Hope you enjoyed this episode. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.